Hi, welcome. It's Mark and Rebecca. We wanted to talk to you to fill in some ideas about both vocabulary and comprehension. First of all, I wanted to talk about an issue that's not covered in depth in the reading in the textbook about vocabulary called collocation. And collocation is the notion that a word is commonly used in the context of a set phrase. And this is especially important when you're teaching vocabulary to English language learners who might not have a natural ear sound for how a word should sound within a sentence. Right. And so this can really address how students are using vocabulary, especially when you hear them use a word and we would say, oh, that's an awkward way to use the word. It often has to do with they don't know the collocation of that word. Recently this happened when I was working with my students on the themes of individuality and conformity, and they had to write about a time when they conformed. And so one of the students, actually several of the students, would use those terms in phrases like, I was conformity when I decided to do what my friends were. They're just not familiar with the word and they didn't know how it should be used. So there's a couple articles that I will upload the links to. One is by a guy named Joseph Stockdale, and he writes about definition plus collocation and vocabulary teaching and learning. He talks about it being really important when you introduce a new word that maybe 10% of your introduction of that word should have to do with that word's meaning, and then 90% of that introduction of the word talks about how you use the word and what its collocation is. So if you're introducing the word dream, you talk about what verb we usually use with the word dream. So we say things like, we have a dream. And for kids to get to have that natural sounding use of the word, you would introduce not just the word dream, but also the phrase that you have a dream. You might also talk about, if you're using the word run or write or sailed, you might also talk about what adverbs would be commonly or naturally used with that word. And then I think the trickiest one for our English language learners is that whenever you introduce a verb, you want to talk about what kind of prepositions go with that word, because that is not going to come, and they're not going to naturally get that by their ear. So for example, when you talk about the verb disagree, we always say, I disagree with somebody. I disagree with you. I disagree with my parents, or I disagree with my friends. However, if we're using the word discriminate, we always say, you are discriminated against. You wouldn't be discriminated with. And so it's really important that we add that layer of vocabulary instruction when we're teaching those new academic verbs, that we add that layer of, here is the collocation, or here are the phrases that this word is often embedded in. So that just goes into some lesson planning practice. The two articles that I'm giving you, one is a pretty long one by Robin Scarcella about academic language in general. So collocation is just a short part of that, but especially if you're teaching secondary and in the content areas, math or science, history, English, you want to look up this article by Robin Scarcella about academic language, and then Joseph Stockdale has an article that really focuses just on collocation if you want to hear more about that.